like, subscribe, and comment. That'd be great. Werewolf the Podcast can be found now at all good podcasting sites. This video is sponsored by Plop to Drop, the new app from App Store or Google Play that times the release from your ass to the water of your poop, and from that can work out your digestive health. Go find it. Plop to Drop. Welcome to Werewolf the Podcast, and this is episode 69. 69. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my dim and distant past working as a dog on the leash for the British government, and this is called Werewolf Spread Disease. As I said, in this story I'm returning to the old shit days when I fought for, I suppose, what is now king and country. Suppose you've listened to the first few episodes of this wonderful and adventurous podcast. In that case, you should know this already, and you should buy me a coffee at this point, which is in the description, as a gratitude for my storytelling jocularity. You can do this by following the link in the descriptor, and I would like that very much, you wonderful people. Some people have bought me several lattes. It's been wonderful. I was once a worker for the government. Yes, me, a fucking werewolf, was an army man. At least, I think I was part of the army or something like that. I never really knew who I was working for. I just knew they were like pretty big organisation with, as I said before, my leash and collar in their hands at the time. I know what you're thinking. I should know who my bosses were, but to be honest, I didn't really care. I'd been captured while committing atrocities in Kosovo in '98. It was a good time. I mean, the atrocities and stuff, killing and maiming, is so much fun. I love war zones. I tended to go and spend a little vacation time in each one as they arose. Well, that was until these folk caught me. Now I just knew that the people who captured me owned me until I had an opportunity to escape the problem, which they nicely give me in the end. Obviously, go and listen to the first few episodes. It'll make more sense. It was going well working for them. I was able to do things that others wouldn't do for them, so I was useful. I did a lot of killing and stuff. I even saved the Western world once or twice, yes, something like that. Yeah, I know you think I'm just a killing and murdering beastie who likes to kill humans. Well, I am, but sometimes the downside of killing the right people is stopping some, like, fatal disease being released. It's made from narwhal sperm and toast crumbs from being released into the world and wiping out the human race, or you kill a Russian agent and the nuclear bombs no longer fall on London. I was a bad person who did good things for you. Well, maybe not for you, but for your rulers. I did a lot of nasty evil shit that can be construed as good evil shit for the lives it saved. To be honest, I also did a lot of evil and conniving shit too, to keep those people in power, so it all sort of calms out in the end. I was often asked to deal with situations that no one else could. They had found out that I was a ruthless monster capable of atrocious acts of violence and horror, and I had a devious brain for dealing with situations that nice people couldn't sort out with their, let's call it, nice minds. We also had another incredible mind with over 1,000 years of monstrous experience in my posit Fen. He had been an utter bastard for over 1,000 years. He'd forgotten more mental malevolence than I would ever know. If you don't know what Fen is, he's my werewolf soul. He's this, separate being from me, and he's been around a long time, and yeah, he comes into me, 69. He comes into me when I turn into a werewolf and stuff, but anyway, hopefully you know all that. The chief, that's my boss, had met me at Victoria Street Station after a journey of a few hours with Fen on the train. I liked the train a lot. If I went by train these days, I didn't need the couple of agents that escorted me everywhere. Agents were super annoying, and as you probably know, I'd already nicknamed them dicks. They were all dicks. with chips on their shoulders and eagles that had their own gravitational fields. I had done nothing more horrific than fart whilst on my journey. I'd been good. It had been horrific when I had released it into the wild, though. Thank goodness it had been silent, although extremely violent. It had cleared the passengers from the seats in front of me. A pair of them had looked back as they left. On making eye contact with me, I wafted my hand towards the little old lady who was instantly embarrassed as she became the dealer of the gaseous monster. The entire compartment was disgusted with her. I think they thought that she'd shit herself. It was bliss. The chief was in his usual khakis with a group of not-so-secret agents that could easily be recognised as ex-special forces by the Amiga watches and the North Face black jackets. It is pretty easy to identify them. It's like plainclothes police and Superdry for some reason. It's another uniform of sorts. The chief looked a little incongruous with a Costa's coffee in his hand. It just didn't seem to fit this man's image. I wasn't used to seeing him in human surroundings. We were rushed to the doors as though we were going to be attacked at any moment, then whisked away in big black SUVs and taken to some private airport somewhere. Somewhere because I wasn't bothered where. I would go into details, but this is so normal that I learned to switch off to the start of the journey anywhere. The bosses liked me a lot because I never really asked about the details. I just accepted what I was told and did my bit. I want to say I was using my skills to centre myself in the universe, using my extra senses to know exactly where I was and to be able to trace my back like in Taken 2, but I wasn't. I'd made eye contact with the little blonde secretary and I could tell that she was into me. The strong silent type, that is, that I pertained to be. That was about as much fun as I'd had. Travelling was dull. I amused myself as I ignored all except her and was ignored by all except her and just listened to my music and settled back and relaxed. Today's playlist was classic rock. I was told that not interacting with others was the best action on my part, as though I would do anything different. I was told that getting to know people and details was never good. Getting to know you... For me, it was not about getting to know people and things. It was the contempt I held for others that set me apart. Humans, in the majority of cases, are dull and boring unless I get to play with them. They are my playthings or nothing really. The flight was long and dull inside the cargo plane. These big noisy planes were the transport of choice for these journeys. It meant that we sat with ear defenders on so that the engines of the thing didn't deafen us. It was the usual shit, just another day. The plane was full of suits and soldiers. Whatever was going on in this place was going to be serious for me, and I had no idea why I was going. We slam landed on another military base in another dry and dusty place. What's a slam land, you ask? In parts of the world where your government is defending human rights. Have you ever noticed that the USA and UK have never attacked anywhere? Even if they are attacking that country, they are defending it. Amazing. I would assume that if you arrive in a country with guns, bombs and tanks and intentions to do harm to others, then you're attacking that country, not defending something. In these places, the defenders, inverted commas, are worried that they will be shot at and shot down, so they go from really high to the ground really fast in their planes. As they come down, they spray countermeasures. It was amusing to see the sweat of the newbies and the dismissive nature of the soldiers. The suits were shitting themselves as they lashed themselves to the seats, as though in a plane crash or an explosion. And, that would help. Fen and I watched the pretty fireworks that shot out of the wings and the plane's body. It was cool, these wonderful sparkly countermeasures. Part of the slam crash was the slam as it landed. The pilot counted down before the hit to try and take away the shock. Then there was a blam slam, a bounce and engines screaming in reverse. I couldn't hear the squeals and screams over the noise, but I could see them on the people's lips. The nerd across from me on the plane had wet himself and would have PTSD from this landing and what would happen next. Then the next thing was to clear the runway and the aircraft as quickly as possible. There was a considerable commotion on landing as many people ran and things got heated with conversations and general logistics. I think the guy shat himself too, but I would never know as it was too damn busy. The chief was being talked at from all directions while being escorted off by gun-toting dicks. They had their guns in their hand and... They had their guns, not the dicks in the hand, that'd be different, wouldn't it? They had their guns in their hands, were ready, and were scoping the perimeter. No one spoke to me and purposefully acted like I wasn't there. I fell into a natural bubble of space behind the chief as we made our way across the tarmac yet to another set of fucking black SUVs, waiting for us to get them so they would whisk us off once again to some place in this place. As I said, I didn't care where or when I was, I just cared that I needed to do something that might be fun and then I could go home. We climbed into the back of the SUV with the usual plethora of special army soldiers. Ricky Gervais is so funny. I stole special army soldiers from his show extras. God, it pisses off the SAS. When you refer to them repeatedly as special army soldiers, you have to do it repeatedly though. The first time you say it, they laugh. The second time you say it, they smile. After that, they get more and more annoyed as I say it again and again and again and again. The SUV was super heavy on its wheels and sluggish, pulling away, implying that this thing was armoured to the hilt. The soldiers were a mix of specialists and carried personal concoctions of weapons and body armour. Probably mercenaries then. This was one of those off-the-book jobs where if the shit hit the fan, the government could say they had nothing to do with it. They were employing private contractors. That should be said again with inverted commas, as they had been trained and were employed by the government that said they were not employing them. I liked those jobs the best. To be honest, they were always the most exciting and brutal. Often we could do things that we would not be allowed to do if the Queen knew about it. Oh, she's dead. Sorry. Moment's silence. We were currently driving down a long, straight, well-made road in a rock-strewn desert. The chief for once was sat next to me and looked quite concerned as we travelled. I won't say I liked it when the chief was concerned about something. It usually means that things are complicated. I don't mind when things are difficult or messy, but I really hate it when things are complicated. Complicated means time-consuming. I enjoyed walking in, doing the shit I had to do, and then walking out. I hated dealing with the intricacies of diplomacy. Not really being a diplomat. Diplomat. I can't even say that word. Never mind be one. Eventually, phone conversations were dealt with, and the chief sat back in his seat, elbow resting on the door of the car as he looked out at the flat lush scenery outside. Well, Will, we have a problem. We are on our way to a very important prison, he said. What they have done here is they've took terrorists and put them in this facility. Now the issue we have is that the terrorists are from 3 different factions. These factions should not have been able to exist in harmony, and what was expected was a bloodbath between them. This was a 96% statistical outcome of doing this, according to the wet-necked pen pushers. So knowing this, they decided to let the UN bring in observers to observe the terrorists killing each other. The thought was that the prison population would kill itself off under the eyes of these observers, getting rid of these dangerous monsters at little risk of looking like they, the government, were doing the killing. It was a simple way of dealing with issues. The issues being the terrorists they captured wanted to kill off but did not know how to do it. He went quiet as I could see his confusion and distress. What has happened is a 1% statistical outcome. The 3 factions have got together and united against a familiar foe. They have pooled their information and they are working together. They've made those terrorists in that prison even more dangerous. As you can imagine, this is not something we can allow. The problem is that we cannot get rid of the prisoners under the scrutiny of the UN observers. They were taking the odd individual out into the desert and, let's just say, not bringing them back for a while, but the numbers involved meant that questions were asked after a dozen had gone, and those people could then not be traced, so we have been brought to solve the problem. Fen, my giant wolf soul, sat next to me in the empty seat. Well, it wasn't an empty seat because he was sat there, but there was no human there because it was an empty seat. So even though it was an empty seat, he looked at me and I looked at him. This was going to be one of those complicated ones. The terrorist groups I waved at the chief into silence. Those details didn't really matter. I didn't care who their allegiance was to. Silence fell on the car, and Fen and I sat in due consideration of the facts we had. So we need to get rid of a number of prisons in a prison, but you need to do it in a manner that the UN will think is okay, I asked him with a laugh escaping me at the end of the stupid question. How am I any help in this? The chief at this point had removed his khaki peaked cap and was rubbing his hand through his hair as he did when he was stressed. He looked at me and nodded. Yes to the first question. I've no idea about the second question, he replied. Although you and Fen are good at getting away with shit like this, especially, and you love problem solving, so maybe it is that you are a werewolf and that will help us here. You guys are devious, psychotic bastards. That may help us, he smiled as he returned his hat to his head and observed the passing scenery-less scenery once more. I like it when the chief pays us compliments like this. Some would take offence at such horrible descriptions, but for us it was a realisation of what we were. Silence again overtook the car as brains were put into gear. After some time, Fen spoke to me through his mental telepathic shit. That's how we communicate. We don't speak. We have mind links and stuff. I remember in the Middle Ages a way we used to kill all at sieges, he sent me. Okay, I replied. Seems sort of applicable here. Okay. In the good old days, you would get to a city or a castle, and the cowards inside would not come out and fight. They would lock the doors and not let you in as they defended the walls. If you tried to get in, they would stand on the town's walls and throw rocks and shit at you while you tried to get in. So we would sit outside it and wait for them to fucking starve. Well, sometimes this might take too much time, especially in certain countries where we kind of knew other cities and states would send help. What we would first do, and see whether or not we can do here, is we can poison the water source for the place. I considered this. That may be the answer, but if the observers find poison in the water, that could be bad. Also, it might kill guards and observers. That's probably an issue. Fuck 'em, replied Fen. I don't think that can be the case, Fen. We need to kill them without the observers being able to work it all out. You know, most poisons can be worked out and spotted and stuff. Honestly, that'll be spotted and we're not allowed to do that. We both began. Silence fell as we both again fell into thought until Fen just sat up and raised his head again. Okay, well, I have a little idea. One of the ways we could poison the population was by introducing disease to the castle. We could throw rotten corpses of animals and paper over the walls and let them explode in the besieged town. This would spread rotting material all over the place, and that would cause disease and plague to spread. The people would often surrender to escape the pestilence. The great thing is the prisoners cannot do that. They have to stay. Obviously, we would wait for the people and then murder them on the way out if it was a siege, and we would also torture them by throwing the bodies of their former friends rotting over the walls. Kind of psychological as well. What if we did the same with these prisoners? I mean, not throw their rotting friends over the wall, but sort of disease them out, he asked. I think the observers may see the dead bodies and the bloated goats that we leave around the place to introduce disease, I replied. No, Will. These prisoners, probably, most likely, will not be vaccinated against the diseases like the Western observers. So we could... Fenrir is an absolute genius. He's done so much evil shit that nothing is new to him, and he has a shitty thing to do in every situation. I see what you mean. That's a great idea, I smiled and turned to the chief. who listened in somewhat disbelief. He was soon on the phone speaking to the prison as we travelled. He asked the relevant questions to the irrelevant people. He found that there were no vaccinations for certain diseases that they were having a problem with such like tuberculosis and typhoid and all those other deadly diseases beginning with T in that prison. They had to quickly remove and isolate anybody with the symptoms to ensure others could not catch it. Tuberculosis is a disease of the lungs and pulmonary systems that kills half the people that it infects. It is highly contagious and spreads through the air. Typhoid is a bacterial disease that is spread from inadequate sanitation. It is passed around in fecal matter and piss, often from one unclean person to another. Here was the plan that I gave to the chief. Well, you've probably worked out what we will do now. I suggested that we find diseased folk in the prison and outside the prison and mix them in with the large general population who are all crushed together. We would also introduce typhoid and not maintain the standard of sanitation. I would leave any other diseases that the boffins could think of to be found to be introduced by themselves. Maybe they'll bring out such a winner as smallpox. Wouldn't that be lovely? After the brief conversation, the chief asked the driver to stop the convoy. We pulled over to the side of the long, straight, lovely road and sat for a moment, stroking his beard. Well, we didn't sit stroking his beard. He sat stroking his beard. It would be weird if we all sat stroking his beard, but we pulled. Anyway, he kept looking out the window and then at me. I could see many thoughts passing through his head and multiple emotions passing over his face in a short amount of time. The engines had been stopped, but the necessary air conditioning was whirring in the background. There was a look of confusion from the others in the vehicle. They had no idea what was going on. Fen looked at me and seemed a bit nonplussed about what's happening. I mean, as nonplussed as a wolf can look. Have you ever seen a wolf shrug? It's actually quite effective, to be honest. With a sigh, the chief turned to look at me. You are such a fucking beautiful, horrific cunt, he spat at me. The chief didn't swear, so this was somewhat of a shock and brought warmth to the cockles of my heart. I saw what was happening. He was dealing with one of those things that I've never had. It's called a conscience. Fen was laughing and I smiled at the man. You're right, that's exactly what I am. He then shouted forward to the driver, turn us round, let's get back to the airport for fuck's sake, we can get out of this place. And that was how a werewolf spreads some disease. I didn't hear what happened in the prison. I don't really give a shit, to be honest, but I'm sure it was brutal, horrible, and glorious. Thanks for listening. I love you all. You're wonderful people. This was, just a story from the past. I'm going to get back to bad-mouthing humans probably in the next one. I didn't want you to, feel too bad about yourself, so I thought I'd give you a wee break. Love you loads. Bye!